webinar. With me, Valentine.
Good morning, everyone. It's already afternoon in Nairobi. It's a pleasure to have you all here. My name's Valentine Miheso. I work with David Atagra within the Strategic Partnerships Division, and we do look forward to a very engaging discussion this morning.
Thank you very much, Valentine. So I also have a wonderful group of panelists today who will be leading us through the discussion and provide key insights on how Nigeria could develop strategic partnership to chart a path to recovery, but also build resilience for the country's economy and agri-businesses. So joining us on the discussion today, we have Dr. Muazu Abdulkadir, Permanent Secretary, Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, who will provide insight on government program, the Green Alternative, and then its link to creating growth within the agribusiness. Dr. Muazu, you're welcome, sir. Also, we have Mr. Additional Emmanuel, who is a director with the Nigeria. He's a director investment promotion at the Nigeria Investment Promotion Commission. He will be able to talk to us around investment, a promotion of investment in agriculture in Nigeria. Also on the panel, we have Ms. Jennifer Ban. She's head of partnerships at Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, based in Nairobi. And then we have Ms. Tinuket Temitokwe, the rep of the DG Abuja Chambers of Commerce and Industry. And then we have Ms. Kola Awosonya, who is head of agribusiness at the Sterling Bank PLC. And the chief host for today's event is the CEO of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group, who will provide the opening statement and talk to us about the importance of partnership in rethinking agribusiness in Nigeria and rebuilding the economy. Mr. Laoye Jayola, you're welcome, sir. Please, you may proceed to provide the opening remarks.
Well, thank you, moderator, and thank you for having me. Good morning. The Permanent Secretary for the Ministry of Agri and Rural Development, Dr. Muazu Abdulkadir, Head of Ministries, Departments, and Agencies present, joining us from the webinar, our partners, captains of industry, members of the agri community, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I'm proud to welcome you to the pre-summit event of the 26th Nigerian Economic Summit Group, which is jointly organized by the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, representing the private sector, and the Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget, and National Planning. This year, we seek to engage in a big conversation for action that will shape partnership to chart a path for recovery and build resilience for the country's economic businesses and households, so that we can put Nigeria in a strong position within the community of nations and the changing world order. Now, the big conversation for action will be driven by a series of pre-summit events. And I want to say that Agri has been the first to start, maybe because when you look at the SDG itself, it's talking about no hunger and, and food for all. So you are the first to start, and I want to commend the discussion from the agri sector, because that's the first to start. But beyond that, we're going to have many other ones that will kickstart the discussion on the summit team itself, which is building partnerships for reliance. As a matter of fact, our experiences since COVID has shown that unless we work together, unless we have formidable partnership within and without the country, it is difficult for any one country to deal with this issue. Now, At the summit, it will enable us to convene a wider range of stakeholders to deliberate on a broad set of thematic and sectoral issues, and so that we can have key outcomes on the way forward. Now, it has become apparent that Nigeria must seize the opportunity presented by COVID-19 pandemic to deepen and rethink its approach to agribusiness ecosystem and the agricultural value chain in general for the transformation of the agri industry. Agribusiness plays a very important role in the agricultural transformation process by providing forward and backward linkages to other economic sectors of Nigeria. The Nigerian agricultural sector is the largest employer of labor, as it's more than 1/3 of Nigerian labor force, which is the highest in the last 20, that's been the highest in the last 23 years. And one of the concerns we've always had is that if you look at the GDP of Nigeria, agri sector is very large. But if you look at the agri sector in a very detailed terms, you realize that crops production alone account for almost about 90% of that, which is why if you want to improve the work we do, we need to look at the linkages across. How do we move from crop production to value addition? And one of the things we hope that this partnership will do is to be able to help us to provide all that we need to discuss, especially investment opportunities that can aid the provision of necessary policy and regulatory framework that will ensure inclusiveness, scalability, and viability. How do we ensure that everybody is there? How do we bring to scale? And how do we ensure that the businesses are viable? I'm a firm believer in the fact that if we do this, then we'll answer a number of questions regarding how do we lift our people out of poverty? How do we ensure that we create jobs for our people? Now, agri is one of the sector of focus for Nigerian economic diversification. And that's because of the role it plays, not only in food security, but providing industrialization and jobs, and ensuring that we're stimulating strong resilience to external vulnerability and fostering shared prosperity. There's presently a rapidly growing local and regional demand for Nigerian agri produce, and this presents the country with new opportunities on the supply and the competitiveness of the agri commodities within the region. The importance of private sector investment in developing agribusiness value chain in Africa cannot be overemphasized, as it's underlined by the AU Agenda 2063, the Malabo Declaration, and the Zero Hunger Goal of the UN 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development. It is our hope that today's public-private dialogue will help in harmonizing investment mobilization in Nigerian agri sector, and also help to provide short and medium-term recommendations for government, private sector, and other stakeholders to consider in accelerating sustainable growth and development in the Nigerian agribusiness ecosystem. We believe that with sustained effort from both the private sector and public sector and other active collaborators with the government and citizens, Nigerian agribusiness ecosystem will be able to draw the required investment that will make the agricultural industry a major contributor to economic development in the national interest. We look forward to more trend-setting and collaborative development on the Nigerian economy. So I want to thank you. I want to say that this webinar therefore seeks to convey stakeholders to retrain their approach to investment in agribusiness ecosystem through the operationalization of the Country Agribusiness Partnership Framework, CAP-F. So I want to welcome you, and we look forward to a very, very interesting discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, CEO, for that wonderful opening statement. this is quite good, strong, and has actually highlighted the importance of building back better and building back with others and not walking alone, and not leaving anyone behind. Just to highlight a few things from what you have said, the pandemic has shown the fragility and vulnerability of the agriculture and food systems generally in Africa, and Nigeria is not an exception. Many people have looked at it as a problem, but some are taking it as an opportunity to be able to rethink strategy, policy, and regulatory framework. So this is quite important. And also talking about the AFCFTA that has come on board. How is Nigeria taking advantage of this common market and ensure that we're able to build collectively with the private sector? We know that many businesses are innovating, reinventing themselves and adapting to the new normal. We need to be able to work collectively with the government to play its role, its part in supporting and stimulating the private sector in Nigeria, and ensure that we're able to mobilize both the financial institutions and other stakeholders to invest in the supply chain and build resilience of the private sector in Nigeria. So without taking much of our time, we will go straight into the panel discussion. And we will be starting this conversation with the Permanent Secretary, Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, Dr. Muazu. Dr. Muazu, welcome to this webinar. I want to note that the recent biennial review report of the African Union did note that Nigeria's agriculture public expenditure hovers around 2.7% of total government budget. And this is putting together expenditure as a nation and not just the federal government. And yet Malabo talks about government, encouraging government to put and spend 10% of its annual budget on agriculture. Now, given the challenges that the pandemic has posed, what is the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development doing to stimulate private sector investment in agribusiness to be able to fill that financial gap that has been created based on the demand on government resources in tackling issues of health and other social services?
Thank you so much. Again, we're morning in Nigeria, so good morning, everyone. The CEO of the Nigerian Economics Summit Group, other panelists, moderators, and all who are on this very important discourse. I'm happy, I'm pleased to be here and to participate in this webinar. You started with a very interesting observation about the funding of agriculture as a sector and drawing a comparison with the Malabo commitment. Yes, the Malabo commitments are commitment to which Nigeria is committed. And you can safely say maybe our funding as a percentage of our development budget is still far from the 10% that is recommended. But honestly, that is not the whole picture. I was discussing with the Minister of Budget and National Plan and the Minister of State, raising the same issue. And his perspective is that we are probably not correct. If you look at the totality of funding, if you take all the interventions by the Central Bank of Nigeria and NISA going into agriculture, you may say they are not budgetary. Probably if you cumulatively calculate, they may be hovering above 10%. But truly, yes, the commitment from the development budget of government is still far away from 10%. And government is doing everything possible to raise that. Now, the next question is, in view of COVID-19 and the obvious funding gaps, what is government doing to bridge it and stimulate private sector participation in order to promote agriculture? A lot. We believe the role of government, primarily first with respect to agriculture, is to ensure that the country is food secured. That is fundamental number one. And I think that is the foundation on which we can build all other linkages to promote agricultural production, and then to promote linkages that will lead to both forward and, as you say, backward integration. And in addition to budget, the financial institutions of government, particularly the central bank, is doing everything possible to stimulate private sector by trying to make finances accessible to the key stakeholders involved in the various stages of the value chains. But as you know, and as everybody knows, the most important role of government in promoting business is to focus on creating the enabling environment that will make it easy for the private sector, easy and safe for the private sector to invest. And there have been a lot of effort, even before COVID, of this government promoting the ease of doing business, investing hugely on infrastructure, particularly rural infrastructure, to create opportunity for smallholder farmers to have access to markets, and then to try and link the markets to industry, agro-industries. And the government is also working with quite a number of groups, including the Nigerian Economic Center Group and other business enterprises, to promote agribusiness and agro-processing. Our greatest effort or focus is to try and provide those basic requirements for businesses to thrive, and then to promote the ease of doing business so that private sector will have an environment that stimulates that, and then to promote international trade, and then inter-regional trade. As a country, I think everybody agrees, we can't compete even with the new trade agreement in the continent without ensuring that our internal trading system is effective and inclusive. So I don't know how many minutes I have, but that is the basic issue. But when you talk about agri, as I said, the discussions and debates have always been interesting. In Africa, do we treat agriculture first as a development issue or as a business? Or do we treat them both? I hope this debate will lead to some discussions with respect to that. But Mr. Jayola raised the issue of sustainable development goals. And the key word is development. It is only when you focus on developing agriculture, increasing productivity, supporting the bulk of those who are engaged in the sector, that the private sector can thrive. So for me, it's both a development issue and a business. And we should take the two together when rethinking our approach to investing in agribusiness. You didn't give me time limit, so I don't know whether I'm talking too much. So let me stop here.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Mwazu. I will come back to you just immediately with regards to what government is doing, what government has been able to do, and then the issue around development or developing agriculture as a development, but also as a business. Along the line, that is a question one of us, one of the panelists needs to be responding to. But you've talked about creating the enabling business environment and all of that. I know that the government agriculture promotion policy program 2016 to 2020 is already winding up, but also the National Agriculture Investment Program plan of 2017 to 2020. These are all blueprints that should enable the private sector to be able to identify where government is focusing, what they are doing, and all of that. Now, these blueprints are winding up. What are you doing? How is the private sector involved, civil society organizations, farmers organizations, to be able to recreate a new blueprint for Nigeria that then carries everybody along to be able to transform agriculture from being seen as a social service to now looking at it from the lens of development and business? What is government doing with to this regard?
Thank you. As you rightly said, the green alternative should be winding up this year. And the ministry is working with the Ministry of Budget and National Planning on a new policy, primarily focusing on what the minister believes should drive agriculture and agribusiness. That is thinking about innovation and technology. The ministry believes with our population of about 200 million and the rate of our population growth, we cannot probably secure the nation in terms of food if we continue at subsistence level. So the country has to start to think of innovating or bringing up innovations in the areas of agricultural production. And one of the key issues we are discussing is leveraging on all the development that have taken place in technology, focusing on mechanization to increase efficiency, particularly supporting the smallholder farmers to mechanize. So that they will not only be able to produce what they need to survive as food, but also they will have surplus to feed the agri industry. Then focusing on using technology to promote particularly the issue of extension services, focusing on technology to invest in the seed system to ensure that farmers have access to high-yielding, drug-resistant, high-quality seed system. So the ministry has set up a very high-level committee. It's about engaging all the other stakeholders for input into this proposed policy. But the fundamental objective of the country and the policy is to develop agriculture, to lead the diversification agenda of the government economically, particularly as we all know, the country cannot continue to rely just on oil. the country needs to diversify its economy. And as the CEO of NESG mentioned, agriculture, in spite of everything, still is the largest employer of labor. It still has the biggest potential for creating jobs. It has the greatest potential for lifting people out of poverty. But more importantly, it holds the key to our survival, that every of those 200 million mouths will need to eat food. If you can't secure the country, you cannot even talk of the business. So we need to have food for people to eat, to survive, and then crops to feed industry. So the focus is on innovation, technology, and promoting agribusiness activities in a way that agricultural production will be linked to agricultural industry, from processing to manufacturing. I hope that answered that question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muazu. And I want to believe that NESG will be following up with you with regards to the new plans that the government is developing to ensure that we have the private sector fully engaged in that process. So Valentine, you want to take us through the next set of questions, please? Thank you, Dr. Muazu, for your response.
No, thank you so much, David. Thank you, Dr. Muazu. Thank you, Laoye, for such wonderful opening remarks, which really, sets the stage for us to now engage with Adeshina from NIPC. And Adeshina, NIPC actually plays a very critical role in driving investments into agriculture in Nigeria over and above, other sectors. And we would like to hear from you, first of all, to give us a scorecard of, how many, PPPs in agriculture that NIPC has facilitated, but also the thoughts that you have around, developing a multi-sectoral coordination mechanism that can be able to drive more private sector investment into agriculture. Mr. Adeshina. Did we lose Adeshina? Oh,
sorry. Yeah.
Good.
Thank you very
yes.
much. Like you rightly pointed out, NIPC is the agency of the Nigerian government with the mandate to coordinate, encourage, and promote investments in Nigeria. We do promote investment in line with government's priorities, defined priority sectors. And of course, agriculture is a leading priority sector because of its economic benefits. And this even becomes, it becomes more, I don't think there's a better time now to even promote investment in agriculture than now. Even though COVID has challenges, but those challenges are also opportunities. I just got to know that the UK Prime Minister has said that UK is turning to West Africa in a bid to rally ECOWAS countries to produce food for export to UK. So this is an opportunity. And at NIPC, we there are so many things we do to promote investment in agriculture. The first is that we grant incentives, pioneer status incentives, which is a tax holiday of 100% tax holiday to industries or activities that qualify for this. And of course, agriculture is one of the tax holiday is 5 years, 3 to 5 years. But now Finance Act has even increased that of agriculture in particular by 3 more years for those who are performing. And apart from the pioneer status, the Finance Act also grants tax waivers for agriculture companies in agriculture, depending on their turnover. For those with less than 25 million, they have a zero tax. For those within 25 million to 100 million, it's 20%. And of course, it's only large companies of 100 million and above that are paying 30% tax. At NIPC, we believe so much in promoting investment that comply with what we call RIPS. That is, they are responsible, they are inclusive, they are beneficial, and they are sustainable. And agriculture is one sector that complies with this. And these are impact investments. We go beyond just looking at the value or the money that investment is bringing in to see what is going to be the benefit to the Nigerian economy in terms of job creation and other economic benefits. So we do what we call investment opportunity profiling. We profile
So we lost Additional there.
We lost Additional.
Yeah. What I would actually suggest is that we will try and reach out to Additional and see if there's a problem with his connection. Please do bear with us. Sometimes the internet can always, fail us, as much as it's one of the things that we are depending on quite a lot, especially in this COVID-19 times. I think, David, I would actually suggest that because we were discussing investments into agriculture, we swing all the way to, Jennifer Ban, who is our head of partnerships at Agra, because, the things that Additional was discussing are very, very close, to some of the work that she's doing. So Jennifer, I mean, from your experience, both at the World Economic Forum, at SAGCOT, and today at Agra, and looking at, Nigeria that you're quite, familiar with, we would like you to really speak to us this particular morning or this afternoon where you are on how, your view on how we can build, the cross-sector collaboration to really drive more investments into agriculture, but especially if you could speak to some of the key challenges that have been faced where, investment opportunities are presented, but, nothing happens for quite a long time and those deals are not closed. And how would you view how we can work together to be able to ensure these investments do close to ensure that the sector, benefits? Welcome, Jennifer.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for these questions, Valentine. This is a very interesting discussion to be part of, and it is especially interesting to have this type of discussion in Nigeria because at Agra, we've been organizing the Agribusiness Deal Room now for a few years, and Nigeria is always on the top of any single investor, being it private equity, any financial institution, development institution, and other type of capital flows that are required to go into the agriculture sector. So it's also interesting to actually hear some of my previous speakers talk about the work that they're doing and the priorities or the preference they're giving to certain incentives and the role of the government in creating an enabling environment. So just coming back to some of your questions, in a sense, like what are some of the challenges and how can cross-sector collaboration and or partnerships support us in overcoming these? I think if we look at some of the momentum that has been created recently, right, I don't think that anybody doubts that private sector investments, whether they're coming from your smallest micro SME or whether they're coming from large corporations, are critical to transform the agriculture sector. And they're critical along the entire value chain. They're critical in the services, the businesses that provide services to the agriculture sector itself. We've also seen a lot of efforts, whether it being from Grow Africa on a regional level, to also in country itself, a lot more momentum around public-private partnerships and especially embedding them in clusters, in hubs, in agropoles, in corridors. So the awareness and the notions is there. What we, however, also have seen is that if you look at all the different announcements of potential transactions that are taking place across the board, across public-private actors, usually only 10% from what we can measure translates into actual cash flows post-announcement. And that is kind of like in line with what we see happening to investments across the world as well, but it's not enough to achieve the type of agriculture transformation that we want. And there's several reasons why actually all of this good intent is not necessarily always translated into action. And if you look even a bit further, even when businesses are being established, to what extent do they actually reach some of the social and the impact that we really would like to see in terms of engaging with smallholder farmers, bringing more equity, ensuring food security, etc. What we often see in terms of as to why this translation is not happening, of course, several-fold. Sometimes it is the enabling environment, the bureaucracy, etc. But we also see that governments are at least trying to prioritize this and identifying the type of low-hanging fruit transactions that are critical to move forward. But secondly, what we also see is just the high transaction cost of making sure that a lot of these investments happen. And to a certain extent, it doesn't really, in the end, makes a difference whether you're trying to push a $1 million or a $200 million transaction forward. The relatively high cost and the expertise and the resources required are significant. One of the other things, of course, is also the matching in terms of the funding. What we hear from a wide variety of investors with different investment appetite is that the right deals are just not there. And when they say the right deals, it means several things. It means like the deal size, often fragmented, in a sense, not the right type of deal size. Most of the funds that we're talking to are looking for at least investments of 10 million and up. We know that a major and significant gap is with the medium and the micro SMEs as well, but also in terms of just the maturity. And many of the transactions don't really tick the box also in terms of inclusivity and the impact that they would like to achieve. So that match in terms of what needs to happen is not always there. Another aspect is also just alignment. You know, in order for any agribusiness investment to work, you need the right roads to be there, you need the right staff to be there, you need suppliers to certain businesses, you need off-takers. And what you often see is that even if you're, for example, an anchor buyer with muscle power and you want to build a $50 million processing plant, etc., what happens to the back end of the value chain? Who's going to ensure that the appropriate seed varieties and that your farmers that are supplying to you actually are aggregated properly, are equitably engaging in your value chain and are delivering the right value and volume of what is required? So specifically on those two, in terms of how do you improve that matchmaking between the capital that is out there and the opportunities that are emerging in the pipeline? And secondly, how do you ensure that there's more alignment across different actors in the value chain? Those are the two things that we thought we really need to address. So there are a couple of things that we've seen emerging and that we're also contributing to as AGRA. Specifically in the agribusiness deal room environment that we have created, we're bringing together really the whole ecosystem of different actors in the agriculture investment space that need to talk to each other, need to sit with each other, and need to co-design. And Grow Africa and the CAPF process is, of course, very critical in doing all of that. And we're working with many of you around this virtual panel to achieve that. So what does the pipeline look like? What deals are in the pipeline? Who needs to do what by what time to make that happen? So that is one. I think secondly, in terms of just cross-sector collaboration, has to do also with how do we improve the sourcing from African farmers, being it small, medium, or larger farmers. I think this is actually quite critical. And what we have seen last year at the African Green Revolution Forum in Accra, there was really like a wide range of anchor buyers who posed the questions to AGRA and similar colleagues. How can you better work together to create a service offering to us as an institution to improve the way in terms of how we work with smallholder farmers and how we work with the SMEs, the aggregators, the traders, everybody in the value chain who actually needs to make that value chain work. And I think that those are two really concrete activities, platforms, and where all of us should start engaging in and start developing new ways of engagement, new approaches, and new business models to make those work better. Because I really think that that's where a strong solution lies. And we have the examples, right? And we have already early stages of success. Grow Africa signed term sheets with between the Nigerian government and Dangote in terms of investing in the tomato value chain, a major achievement that can really start setting out the infrastructure of how some of these type of new alliances, new approaches can work, in really working from an ecosystem perspective, having different actors who commit to different interventions at specific times to make sure that we drive these investments forward. Just to throw some numbers at you, last year in the deal room, we worked with close to 19 SMEs from Nigeria, representing $30 million in capital. In the bigger scheme of things, it actually seems small, but we managed to create almost like a community or alliance of investors, companies, institutions who want to start looking at this from an even bigger and bigger scale so that we can crowd in more activities, more companies, build a stronger pipeline so that everybody knows if you're looking for investments in agriculture, these are the top 50 companies that are relevant to look at this point in time, or even the top 200 companies. So I'd like to leave it at that as just an initial framing of in terms of what some of the opportunities are and how we're trying to work to make that happen. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Jennifer, for those key insights. And you know, it's quite refreshing to see this morning that we have the PS from the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development here. We have Adeshina from NIPC and our colleagues at NESG who represent the private sector. And it would be nice for them to hear from you how the Africa Green Revolution Forum this year, and specifically the thematic working group on the deal room, we will be engaging with Nigeria. I know we are already talking to them, but this is a good opportunity just to highlight some of the key engagements that we are anticipating, especially the year-round engagement. So it's just not about an event.
Yes, absolutely. So I think this conversation that we're having now is really like the first proof in point, right? That we matchmaking, the agribusiness deal room that we're organizing at the Green Revolution Forum, which will take place from the 8th till the 11th September, is really a matchmaking effort. We bring together 50 of the most prominent investors across Africa, 40 financial institutions. There will be over 300 businesses that will be in the deal room, all presenting opportunities of different sizes, and also 15 governments who will be in the room with two different hats, including the Nigerian government, really to share insights into investment opportunities for their own specific countries. And with Nigeria, we're working on a series of value chains that will be presented, but also to sit there in the room as a troubleshooter and actually a partner who can address challenges in the enabling environment and is willing to engage with investors and listen to some of the bottlenecks and challenges and take some of these priorities home and start fixing them where they are occurring in the investment landscape. So it's really, it's almost like I always say, almost like a festival of trying to create deals and commitments. The interesting thing is, from a Nigerian perspective, what we will also be looking at is what I mentioned earlier in terms of sourcing in Africa. How can we bring anchor buyers, being it some of the large corporates like the brewers and some of the major processors, including your Nestle's and also Sahel Grains, etc., Dangote, together, and really look at what can we all do jointly to build integrated value chain investments. Many of these businesses are already there, they're established, but it's challenging for them to increase their sourcing of raw material to certain standards, being at 60% or even 100% of what it is that they would like to process and get the right volume and quality. So we are going to engage with a number of these businesses, sit around the table with critical partners and see who can do what and what can be our work plan for the coming year going forward. So also for Nigeria, we're still getting submissions in actually. I'm just waiting to see what the concrete actions are that we're going to work on, but I can already share that some of the large companies in the processing sector will be participating in the deal room to have those type of conversations. From a Nigerian government, there will be a 1-hour country session where the government will share its investment opportunities, also present some of the interesting and upcoming SMEs. We'll also address and engage with investors with many questions that are all around COVID, both in terms of risk management, but also in terms of what are the government priorities and how where do we see opportunities actually for new type of technologies and business models to be introduced. And then lastly, we have the submissions of a wide number of Nigerian companies from different sizes who will be engaging with investors in the deal room. As of next week, we will open up all the sessions and all the profiles so everybody can engage and see all of those together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. We are looking forward, to the Nigerian team, playing in the Premier League. As we know, the Green Eagles are a very strong football team, so we are really looking forward to very strong engagement. Adeshina, welcome back. We lost you a little bit, and we will give you just a few minutes to complete your submissions. We engaging you to really frame to us how NIPC is, building. Is building the incentives to attract, private sector investment into agriculture. And the additional question I would like you to address, Adeshina, is how do you differentiate or engage local private sector, local Nigerian, private sector, and international, private sector? If you could take another 2 to 3 minutes, and then we go over back to David.
Thank you very much, Valentine. Let me first apologize for that break. It's just technology.
Technology can fail us sometimes.
Yeah, thank you. So let me start from your last question about to differentiate between domestic investors and international investors. At NIPC, we do understand the fact that if Nigerians don't invest in their own country, it will be difficult to attract international investors. So domestic investors are actually very key part of our investment promotion activity. And it is even more so now with COVID, when it is becoming more difficult to attract, to travel and to attract international investors. So we have to focus more on the domestic investors. And that's some of the things we do is, like I was mentioning, the investment promotion profiles. We do profile investment opportunities. And these profiles are made available not only to the international investors, but even more to the domestic investors who have the wherewithal, they have the resources, but they don't know where to invest into. So the opportunities are usually presented to them. So that is about how we, and then we also collaborate with the states. We have investment promotion agencies at the state level. So we also collaborate with the state investment project agencies to identify these Nigerians, these high net worth Nigerians that can be, that we can market investment opportunities in Nigeria to, for the purpose of investing in their own country or even in their own states. So that is about that. Now, other things we do. Then I think you also asked a question about the kind of what we have been able to, attract in terms of investment. Well, I may not be able to give you that now, but one thing I can tell you that we normally track investment announcements. We track investment announcements by companies or investors who have expressed their intention to invest in Nigeria. And for this year, for half of this year, we have of about $5 billion that we have been able to announcement that we have had. I think about $230 million worth of agri investments have been announced by two companies, Agrotech of United States and Bin & Co Global Limited of Israel. So these are just an example of the kind of the investments that and efforts are being made now to make sure we track them, to make sure that we translate the announcement into actual investment. So other things we do, I've mentioned the fact that we collaborate with state investment promotion agencies. We do investment opportunity profiling. And then we also do sector profiling. We profile sectors, and Agric is is each of these subsectors. We do sector profiles on them so that, and we make them available to investors for them to see the opportunities in each of these sectors and to know if they intend to invest, how do they go about it.
Okay, I think we lost Adeshina again, but thank you. I mean, those are very good insights, and I'm sure for the investors who are on this webinar, they know where to come. And for other delegates, I mean, if you have any questions to any of our panelists, please do raise them in the Q&A. We will be tracking them, and we'll ensure that we pose those questions to all our panelists. At this point in time, I want to swing back to my brother, David, to actually take us through the other set of the panelists. David.
Thank you very much, Valentine, and thanks to Jennifer and Mr. Deshino for providing those insightful comments. So I will go to Ms. Tinuke Temitope from the Abuja Chambers of Commerce and Industry. The Permanent Secretary has talked about the new focus, taking agriculture industrialization, adding value to raw materials rather than just selling out raw materials and all of that. It would be nice to hear from the Abuja Chambers of Commerce and Industry what we need to be doing in terms of market development, creating access to a market for smallholder farmers, and then leading into improving quality standards that can also enable farmers to earn premium on their investments. So okay. Ms. Tinuke, please go ahead.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon once more, everybody. I couldn't on my video. I couldn't start my video. It says it has been stopped by the host, so I will just go ahead. Okay, thank you very much. And I'm here representing the Director General, Abuja Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I'll just go straight to your question. With regards to the contribution of the chambers to industrial development, I wanted to start from what Mr. Lau you mentioned initially in his address. He said agriculture is one of the highest sector of employers of labor in Nigeria, which is a proven fact also. And was also said by the Permanent Secretary, the importance of food security in Nigeria, considering we have an average of over 200 million people in Nigeria. And if we also look at it, most farming in Nigeria is also at the subsistence level. This is also a challenge. So at the chamber, one of the major objectives of the chamber, either in the agricultural sector or any other sector, is to ensure networking among its members, the private sectors. But it is more peculiar to the agricultural sector because we see that most of the enterprise in agriculture are either in the small scale or in the micro scale, the micro and the small scale, though we have some mechanized farmers too, businesses, but not as much as the micro and the small. So one of the main functions in which the chamber ensure is the dissemination of information, because we realize that even when the government is doing so much, even when we have international organizations and NGOs doing so much in this sector, agriculture, it seems that most of the enterprise does not have access to the information. One of the reasons being that some of them are in the rural environment, and some of them just felt they are comfortable with their subsistence level of farming. So the chamber as a whole ensure proper dissemination of information to members in the agricultural sector. We also ensure our participation in with government, especially when it comes to policy development, because the best part of the policy is that we could get more results is when it's being implemented by the private sector. The private sector's dialogues with its members, the micro, the small, and even the major enterprises. So they know their concerns, they know their worries, they know the challenges they are facing. And this will also give them the opportunity to speak while in the dialogue with the government in creating policies that will definitely be beneficial to the agricultural enterprises, and also in the implementation of the policies. Then I also want to speak briefly on the industrialization. We know, I think it was Jennifer that spoke about the value chain a lot. There are a lot of processes involved in agricultural value chain, and each of these processes has the tendency of increasing income into the economy. They have the tendency of industrial enlargement. They have the tendencies for employment creation. So at every sector of this, at every point of this value chain, it is also very important for us to put in all that is needed to expand each of this sector so that we can also get adequate value that is necessary and important for the development of our economy. Okay, I also heard that in industrial development, the Abuja Chamber of Commerce and Industry specifically has always had the idea, and we are still working on it. I think late last year or early this year before the COVID-19 started, we had a policy dialogue on livestock transformation plan in Nigeria. It was a working document was developed, and I think the department in charge of it are still working on it. So this is also part, because it was from a study that was conducted, realized that when it comes to livestock, the dairy, the meat, Nigeria is not even producing up to 50% or up to 40% of what we are actually consuming. Most of these are being imported into the country, which is not very good, because we have everything needed for us to be able to export while having more than enough for us in our society. We have the human capital, we have the land mass, we have everything that could make us to even increase value for whatever it is we are producing in the country before it could even be exported out of the country. So in the industrial aspect of it, the chamber has also been working on ensuring that we have an industrial park, though it's still in the formative stage, to ensure we have an industrial park, because we have, just as I mentioned earlier, that we have most of the people in this sector are the micro and the small, so they might not be able to afford most of those machineries required for their, maybe the production part of the agribusiness, maybe the packaging part of the agribusiness, or the distribution and marketing part of the agribusiness. So the industrial park is to encourage, especially those in the sector of packaging. So even as an SME, the chamber has an established industry with the machineries. So you can just come in with your products, do your packaging, ensure standardization is done, like a one-stop shop, to ensure that agricultural produce are standardized, and also support them with adequate information and necessary networking they needed outside the country to market their produce or to also export their produce. So I think I'm going to stop there.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tinuke. Just a follow-up question for my understanding. Does the Chambers of Commerce or the government of Nigeria have an agriculture industrialization framework in place or blueprint?
I will speak for the Abuja Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We have a working document for the agricultural sector, but for the federal government of Nigeria as a whole, I'm not aware.
Okay, so is this something that the Chambers of Commerce needs to be working with other stakeholders? Because the PS has said this is one area that government is looking at strengthening. And you said that you guys are engaged in policy formulation and working with government to ensure that this policy is implemented. Is this an area that you should be taking interest and working with the Federal Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Trade, and the Ministry of Finance?
Okay, thank you very much, David. I would say the chamber is available and ready. The chamber has always been in discussion with the Federal Ministry of Trade and Investment. So especially then the chamber on its own, we have a policy and advocacy department that even when it doesn't do with agriculture, any other sector, there seems to be an issue ranging. The chamber has always organized policy dialogues, and stakeholders have been invited to participate to develop most of these documents that have been presented to the government at the end of the day. So working in collaboration with any other organization or sector that might be necessary, the chamber is ready to work in collaboration.
Thank you very much for that feedback, and I hope that we will take action after this webinar. So I will go to Ms. Bukola Osunya, who is head of Agribusiness, Sterling Bank. The PS raised the question earlier on in his speech, in his comments, about how agriculture is perceived, whether it's a social sector or it's seen as social services, whether it's seen as a development sector, or it is seen as a business. And I said someone will need to answer that question for me, because I think that the banks are in a better position to be able to tell us what do they think of agriculture. How do they perceive agriculture? Should it be a business? And if it is a business, why is it that we have just about 5% of finance available to the agriculture sector compared to the investment that the banks has in other areas? Why is this the case? Bukola, you may want to talk to us. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. In response to your question and to the question by the PAMSEC, I would like to say that agriculture is a business. Agriculture is a business. And when you say agriculture is a business, agriculture as a business has been said to be a $1 trillion economy. So you cannot say that is not a business. The opportunities within that sector is huge. And if you look at it, it has been said by 2030, agriculture will become a $1 trillion industry in sub-Saharan Africa. So with that, agriculture is a business and not just a developmental project. Now, if you look at what is agribusiness, agribusiness is the value chain that links production to processing, is the series of activities that links production to processing and then to the market. So the value chain starts from production and then to processing and then to distribution. And when we say agri is a business, we are looking at the whole value chain. If you look at the value chain of agriculture, it's divided into different buckets. We have the buckets of pre-upstream where you have activities around input supply. When you say input supply, you are looking at fertilizers, and that's a whole lot of value chain business on its own. You are looking at seed production, you are looking at input distribution, you are looking at mechanization, you are looking at tractorization, you are looking at research, you are looking at extension. All these are activities that go into before you get into production. So if you look at agriculture as a business, it's a value chain. And that's why it's said to be a $1 trillion business by 2030. We have also said in this webinar that the opportunities within agriculture is large. The population of Nigeria is about 200 million. And you had Mr. Dr. Additional of NEPC saying that the British government has said that they are going to be looking at Nigeria, Africa, exporting to them because they have come out of Brexit. So you can see that the opportunity for agriculture as a business is a lot. I just spoke about the pre-upstream. If I decide to break down each of these sectors, if I talk about the fertilizer value chain on its own, it's a huge business opportunity. If you look at this year, the volume of need of fertilizer and what we were able to get, there was a gap. And that is also a business on its own. When look at seed, in agriculture, seed production is very key because it will impact your yield. And so if you are funding a business and you have poor yields, it will impact on what you are going to get. It will impact on your financing and impact on the results. So if you look at agriculture as a business, we put it in the buckets. You have pre-upstream, which I've just mentioned. You have the upstream. Upstream is about production, primary production. Production, whether crop production, livestock production, aquaculture, ruminants, all aspects of production come under the upstream. If you pick each of these, is it the poultry industry you want to talk about? In this period of COVID and post-COVID, you will see that the borders were closed, everybody held on to his own country, and we had to feed ourselves. So you can see that the poultry industry at that point, you didn't have to depend on the importation or the smuggling from the borders. Within our economy, we were able to do some, we were able to feed ourselves. If you are picking, you pick the poultry, you pick the ruminants, you pick the aquaculture, these are all businesses. You come to the meat stream. Under the meat stream, you have agro-processors. We've spoken a lot about the agro-processors. The lady from the Chamber of Commerce talked about the linkages between all those people. So the processors require raw materials to feed to get their outputs. So midstream is also another business where you have the processors. We've seen a lot of rice mills springing up in Nigeria. You have starch production. You have if you take different crops and take their value chain, look at cassava, for example. So many derivatives from cassava, not just as food for gari. You have cassava as an industrial use for starch. You have cassava for producing ethanol. You have cassava for producing syrup used in pharmaceutical industries. You have a whole value chain for cassava. Is it all palm you want to put? So these are processors that fall within that fall within the downstream. And then under the midstream, we are talking about the aggregators, the logistic providers, and a whole lot of value chain. So when you say agriculture is a business, it's not just a developmental project, it is a business because each of these buckets of value chain are business opportunities for the country. And so Nigeria agriculture is a business, and it is a $1 trillion business by the year 2030. What also helps agriculture and what makes it, we've said it a lot here, that it is the largest employer of labor. And when you say labor, what people will use to, their earnings. So agriculture is a business, and it's a viable business for that matter.
Hello, it seems we have lost Bukola. I hope the backend staff can help us check with her and ensure that she's back on the conversation. Quite interesting.
Adama, and I'm sorry to interrupt. I hope Bukola come back as quickly as possible. But I will wish to be allowed to have few remarks in respect of intervention, which is extremely very interesting. Looking at agriculture as a business and as a development issue, because I think this is where not only Nigeria, Africa has to have a deeper look. But let's await that she is able to come back and complete her intervention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, PS. PS, I'm going to come back to you on a few questions based on what Bukola was saying. Maybe while we wait to get Bukola back into the room, she talked about agriculture being a business, and it's a viable business. Government, within this pandemic period, I know that the borders were closed at some point, but later on the borders were, shipping lines could deliver cargoes and all of that. But from the experience from this last 3 to 5 months, as a country, we've been able to feed ourselves as Nigeria. What is government learning from this in terms of the role the private sector, domestic private sector has played, and how we rethink investment within the ecosystem?
Thank you so much. I think very interesting conversations. Everyone knows when this pandemic started, the fear number one was the health issue, whether we have the capacity to respond to COVID-19 within the established national and subnational health systems. In other words, are we able, we have the capacity to respond and make sure that we are able to develop the health system to not only treat those infected, but also to limit transmission and then to minimize disruptions to our economy. The second fear, which was also important, was the potential of the pandemic to disrupt our food chains, supply systems, and agricultural production, which may lead to food crisis. And as we have seen within the last 4 to 5 months, that even though the government responded aggressively, especially in supporting the vulnerable, with a lot of stable and food support, we are not actually in food crisis. We are still apprehensive of what will happen post-2020 wet season. So the issue of I think the sector is still resilient. Why are we not in crisis? Because those who sustain the country are still able to do something, which are the smallholder farmers. And that was why, or that is why it would be an interesting discourse to discuss the issue of the role of private business in sustaining agricultural production. I think everyone agrees, and there is absolutely no doubt about that, that you have to promote business in agriculture. For you to use agriculture as a vehicle for not only diversifying the economy, but improving our economic growth. But look at every country that was able to lift itself out of poverty, especially the South and Northeast Asian countries. You find that they initially treated agriculture as fundamentally a development issue, because it is the investment in agriculture first by public authorities that created the opportunity for the business to thrive. If a bank managing director or manager is talking of agriculture as a business, it is a good news. But the question you will ask is, what percentage of that bank's lending or finance went to agriculture in the last 1 year? How many smallholder farmers, who are the bulk producers of the food we eat, who sustain the country, were able to have access to finance? Will they have survived if they didn't have the resilience to think inward and utilize their own resources to produce the food that we eat? Would they have survived better if government had not intervened at national and subnational level? So I think it's an important discussion. So what I think we should think is private business should take interest and government should support and promote it. But in discussing business and its role in promoting agriculture in sub-Saharan Africa, but particularly in Nigeria, it is my candid view that we recognize that the private sector is divided into two. We have the formal sector and we have the informal sector. The bulk of contribution to agriculture, to GDP, to food security is by the informal sector. And 90% of the informal sector, these are the smallholder farmers, do not have access to financial inclusion, either by the central bank itself, the development banks like Bank of Industry or Bank of Agriculture, and the commercial banks. In response to COVID, the federal government, rightly under the Economic Sustainability Plan, thought of assisting smallholder farmers with a credit of about 580 billion naira, with input support ranging from fertilizer, seedlings, agrochemicals, pesticides, and so on. And the model adapted is the anchor borrows model being operated by the central bank. Our role was to make sure that we are able to identify those farmers that may require this support. And within 6 weeks, we were able to register up to 3.2 million farmers. Working with central bank, our desire and aim was to ensure that at least 1 million farmers have access to inputs before the end of the 2020 rainy season. And we made our data available to central bank. We registered these farmers by their farms. So a farmer who is holding between 1 to 4 acres is registered on his own farm with the coordinates of his landholder. And his input requirements is determined based on what he has. We speak, no single farmer has yet been accepted. Why? Because central bank says most of these farmers are not bankable. They do not have VBN, they don't have bank accounts, and these are farmers that farm. 80% of these farmers are on their farms. They have already planted, they have already gotten some fertilizer, even if it's inadequate, they had seeds, they tilled their lands. But their productivity may not be optimal because we have not succeeded in giving them the assistance. So when you are talking of business versus development, I think it's better to take both together. And it's fundamental. This was what differentiated Africa, or is differentiating Africa with Asia. Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore invested heavily in developing agriculture, to create the opportunity and the environment for the private sector to have the confidence to link productivity to processing and to industry. So it's an important conversation. Unfortunately, we don't have much time. And I hope there will be another opportunity. My final point on this is to appeal to the financial institutions that if they truly believe agriculture is also a business, the word is a business is not complete, it's also a business, and that it is important to promote and support it, then they should dedicate a substantial part of their resources employing the most innovative de-risking mechanism to support the most vulnerable and the most needy who produce the food that we eat. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muazu. This is quite interesting, and I'm sure this is the kind of conversation that our listeners want to hear and want to be part of. I'm told Bukola is back. Yes. So Bukola, I think it was a good flow you had. Unfortunately,
I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry for that breaking transmission.
So, but just before, so you're able to take a few other perspective from what we have been discussing while you had dropped off. The PS talked about what needs to happen, what government has done in terms of supporting smallholder farmers, the 2.3 million farmers that have been registered and all of that. But something interestingly is the fact that the informal sector, from what the PS is saying, is that it's even the informal sector, the smallholders, are the ones that are contributing to the GDP of the country.
Yes.
Now, and when I started my question, I did note that the private sector or the financial institutions' investment in agriculture is barely 5%.
So that was where I was going to when it went off.
So we would like to hear that conversation, but
Yeah.
also then I would like you to also talk about the current programs that government is doing. Should government be involved directly with provision of services like input supplies, credit facilities to farmers? Could the CBN Anchor Borrowers Program and the NISAL program affect the sector differently if we're ensuring this process to the private sector and allowing the financial institutions to run this process? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much once again. So I was just going to mention when my line went off was that in my bank, maybe using it as an example of financial institution, we are supporting the various actors within the value chain in terms of finance. The role of the bank is to provide financial support to businesses across the whole value chain, including the smallholder farmers. Now, we've been financing smallholder farmers for years now, and I'm sure this year alone I've done over 25,000 to smallholder farmers. I've given them facilities. When this anchor borrower started in, okay, first of all, my bank as an institution, we have set aside 10% of our loan books to the sector. And we have been actively involved in this, not even the 5%. So when you say 5% is the average, we are dedicated to 10% of our loan book, and we've been driving this assiduously. We've been financing, we don't discriminate we are financing, we finance the smallholder farmers. And if you know that the population, the farming population has most of them, over 80% of the population are these smallholder farmers. They are the ones sustaining the economy, and they are being financed. We have seen, I'm sure, some of the issues that have affected banks from financing or looking at these smallholder farmers, and it is being addressed, is the issue of the smallholders farmers looking at this thing as a grant or something that you give them the money, they don't come back. And what we did to the smallholder farmers is to ensure that we structure it in such a way that the normal collateral that you would request from a big player, we don't request for such from the smallholder farmers. And then we tie them to off-takers. So I'll give you an example of what it means. You mentioned the anchor borrower. We mentioned something called the prime anchor. We have the anchor borrower itself. They are different. I would try to differentiate between an anchor borrower, a commodity anchor, or a prime anchor. So when you say commodity anchor or the normal anchor borrower, the scheme is about demand and supply. Production of raw materials that is enough for the industries to meet their use. So let me give you an example using the rice value chain. You finance group of farmers in cooperatives. We always encourage them to be in cooperative groups so that you are not funding one by one. Each of the members of the cooperative would open an account, and then the cooperative as a group will open accounts. So we finance them based on their economics of production. So if 100,000 is the economics of production, the 100,000 will be used for purchase of fertilizer, seeds, agrochemicals, mechanization. Everything is in the 100,000 economics of production per hectare. From there, we tie them to a rice processing mill such that when they harvest, the rice processor takes their output, takes the paddy from them because it's the raw material required for them to produce the finished rice. So from the EOP, you don't give the farmers the funds directly. The funds is created as a loan for them. They sign the documentation, and then the loan is booked. The input is supplied. So government does not have to be involved in the input supply because it is a market already. It's structured. It is a business. And then once government is not there, I think what happens to the farmers most of the time is that when they see government is involved, that's when they believe it's a grant or it's something that is free funds. But without the government, this structure will run, and we have seen it running. So the farmers are given the inputs, the proper inputs are not the cash, so that you ensure that this inputs gets to them. And then we have extension agents who are in place to ensure that they plant using the good agricultural practice, ensure the right spacing, ensure the right application of fertilizer when it is due, ensure all these things are done. Because when you ensure that they are done at the right time and in the right proportion, then you're able to get the right output. When we do this, all the extension agents are put in place, they plant, and then there's monitoring throughout the period. When they harvest, you have linked them to an off-taker so that market is guaranteed. The off-taker is the guaranteed source of market for them. But what you find out at the end of the day is that when they harvest, some of them will refuse to give it to the off-taker. They'll say the price has gone up. Even when the off-taker is ready to take at that price, they would still want to sell on their own. So those are the things that have affected the anchor borrower program. You see some farmers want to divert the funds. I'll tell you, when this program started in 2016, my bank was the first bank that did the transaction. We financed these farmers. That year was when there was recession. And you will not believe it that they had good yields that year. Their yield doubled what they normally get. The price was also very good. And everything about them paying that loan was very easy for them to pay because they had off-takers, they had markets, the price, everything was right. But you still see some of these farmers divert the things to go and sell elsewhere. And when they sell, you expect that they bring the money to the bank. But some of them will not do that. But with the various innovations and initiatives that have been put in place about monitoring these farmers, ensuring they have BVNs, trying to locate them and all these things, I believe it has been addressed and it will continue to improve and get better. So people not wanting to finance them, it's not that they don't want to. It's because of the issues around diversion of funds, diversion of the sales proceeds after the harvest. And what we do under this thing, we also put insurance in place to ensure that if there is any problem against, we now have yield insurance, we now have insurance that is against climate, insurance against drought, insurance. So all these mechanisms are put in place to ensure that these farmers are there. So what we have done, I was happy when the PAMSEC spoke about the use of technology. Technology is very, very key in driving agriculture. And that's why we have come up and partnered with a lot of agro-led technology companies, where the farmers were using technology to do their mapping, technology to get their details, technology to get their BVN, technology, everything about the record of the farmer is now put in a digital format. And with that, we're able to do a lot of tracing, we're able to do a lot of monitoring, we're able to do a lot of things with these farmers. So we are supporting the federal government in the initiative of ensuring that these farmers have access to finance. In addition to that, to secure access to finance, we are there. We also, as a bank, brought in an initiative that we call the SABEX. And what does the SABEX do? It's a product initiated by a bank using technology, especially even now that we have COVID, to drive it. And what does it do? It's the use of when the farmers harvest. Another thing that affects these poor farmers is that when they harvest, they need money at that point in time. So they quickly sell off their goods so that they have money to be able to do things. But we have brought in an innovation wherein the farmer does not have to sell when he harvests. What we now do is that we have created warehouses. We have partnered with warehousing and commodity exchanges where these farmers, when they harvest, they can bring their crops to the nearest warehouse close to them, and they'll be issued a warehouse receipt. With the warehouse receipt, they deposit their commodities in the warehouse, the produce is certified, and then it is certified for quality, for quantity, it is cleaned, and when all this are done, they're issued a warehouse receipt as a proof of ownership of the commodity. The receipt is now used as a collateral that the farmer can use to, if he wants money, if he needs money at that time and he doesn't want to sell, he can store up his goods in the warehouse. With the aid of the warehouse receipt, he can come back to ask for funds right there on the platform. And it's a digitized platform. Right there on the platform, he would have access to funds. With that funds, he can leave the goods in the warehouse, use the funds to do whatever he wants to do. And then when the prices have gone up, he can decide to sell. So we have solved his problem of access to finance. We have solved his problem of access to markets. On that platform is a seller and buyer meeting each other. The warehouse, the industries, the agro processors who require the raw materials have access directly to the farmers on the platform. They are guaranteed quality, they are guaranteed pricing, and they are guaranteed is efficient and transparent. It's a reliable platform that allows the access to raw materials. You can make your demands of what you need. And on that platform, because the aggregate of people that have the raw materials are there, and the people that and the farmers are there, it will solve a lot of issues. And we have put that that platform in place to address post-harvest losses. Because another problem that has affected the sector is the huge post-harvest losses. And these are things that we're doing as a financial institution to address post-harvest losses, to assess access to finance, to assess access to aggregation, access to transport on that platform. If you want transport to get there within the shortest possible time, everything is there on the platform. So these are contributions that we are doing as a financial institution to meet the various needs. Even we are also partnering with the federal government on the COVID-19 access to farmers, palliative, to ensure that the farmers get inputs at the right time and everything. So I believe financial institutions are there and they want to support the government. In fact, we have increased agriculture because agriculture has been seen as a business. The funding to the sector has greatly increased in the last few weeks. The moderator asked me about the various funding opportunities. Yes, we are working together with CBN and even from the bank's balance sheets to provide access to funds. And I believe that all these initiatives is to ensure that the sector is adequately funded, is to ensure that finance is not a problem, is also to ensure that markets, access to markets is there for these farmers. We are in between the users and the beneficiary, the people who plant and the people who need this as raw materials. And I believe it's working, it's increasing, and before you know it, I'm sure the whole industry will be at 10%. We are already planning for the dry season. We've just finished, the wet season is just going off now. We are already planning for the dry season. And in terms of crop production, we're doing that for crop. We are also doing the same thing for livestock, in the livestock value chain, in the aquaculture value chain, even in the dairy. We've started going into dairy. So I believe as financial institutions, we are there to support both the farmers, the processors, and every actors within the value chain. Mechanization is very key. I'm looking at it at a time that Nigeria will become a highly mechanized country, where we are not just depending on the small farm holders. We have big mechanized farms in large clusters of land all over the place. I'll tell you that the demand for maize, the demand for paddy is so high. Even during this planting season, fertilizer was in high demand. People had money, but the product was not available. So you can see that there are so many opportunities within the sector that we can meet. With this platform I mentioned, price stability will be there. You will not have instances where the price is so high. The price of maize is so high now. So with this platform, it will also solve the problem of price fluctuation within the markets.
Yeah.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
Bukola. That was extensive, and I'm sure our listeners would have gained a whole lot and also connect with what the government is doing. Listening to all that you have said, two key policy issues come to mind with regards to how government could enhance private sector or the financial institutions increasing their financing access to smallholders and those that are not yet banked. And one of it is what we see in East Africa, which is common, is the contract farming. I know that in Ethiopia, there is the contract farming legislation. In Tanzania, you have same. In Kenya, you have same. And what this does is that it limits side selling and guarantees the investment of the private sector, but also guarantees pricing for smallholders. If the market price is higher than what the contract initially had said, the law requires that you revise to be able to pay what the market is doing. So I want to believe that this is something that Nigeria could be looking at. You have the opportunity to learn from countries that are already implementing this. I mentioned Ethiopia, Tanzania, and a few others. The second is the absence of the warehouse receipt system legislation in Nigeria. It's good to note that Sterling Bank is already doing something on its own. But imagine what would have happened if you have 10 other banks, even the commodity exchange themselves, investing in this, what you guys are doing, because there is a legislation. So I think as we build together, these are things that I think the Ministry of Agriculture needs to be taking up, working with the private sector to be able to develop further. I see that we are just about 15 minutes away from ending this webinar. I would like
Can I just add, okay, sorry.
Go ahead, please, before.
Okay, I just wanted to respond on the contract farming. It has started already. And so what we're doing now is a lot of contract farming and something you call in growing, where you have your land and you bring the farmers to the land to farm in large contiguous location. And I believe it's working, it's gradual. And I believe these are some of the things that legislation is very, very key to drive the side selling, like you mentioned. And I believe the securities and exchange commodities, they are working on the legislation to make sure that all things come to be. So as a financial institution, we are not just on our own. We have a group of all the banks coming together to support the sector. We, as a bank, we have an Agri Summit that we do annually. Last year, for example, we had a panel where all the banks came together on the platform of the bank to say what they are doing to help the financially to the sector. Also, this year we're having the summit, and I believe the Honorable Minister of Agriculture will be attending. And we are ready to work with governments we have Association of Heads of Agric Officers of Banks, and we want to ensure that we support the sector and drive a lot of things. And that's why you've been seeing a lot of banks are now funding the agricultural sector. And I would like to tell the PAMSEC that we are there. We want to support the work the Federal Ministry of Agric is doing in ensuring they provide the right platforms, they provide the irrigation, provide all the things required, and then the banks will come in. So the role of government is to provide infrastructure, and then with this infrastructure, the demand for the commodities in Nigeria is so high. If we have more than one planting season in Nigeria, if we are not depending on just the rain season, if we have a lot of irrigation, we have the river basins in place. We can use all those places and we'll have cropping throughout the year. And the demand for these products is available. With that, if the price fluctuation will even come down. What happens to price is that when the commodity becomes scarce, then those that have it will mop up the price. But if we have 3 or 4 planting seasons within the year, it would stabilize pricing and we'll have availability of products. Thank you.
Can I just make a quick statement, David? Thank you very much for that statement. May I invite you to repeat that so other countries and banks can learn from what you've been doing in the deal room in September? Thank you.
Yes, incidentally, I'm part of the AGRA deal room, and I'll be having the AGRA webinar this afternoon and AGRF webinar this afternoon. So we will work with AGRF to talk about what Sterling Bank is doing in that sector. Thank you.
You're most welcome.
Thank you very much. We're running out of time now. Valentine, you want to take us through the questions, the key questions that are up for our panelists to address, and then we get the PS to give his closing comments. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you so much, David. I mean, you can see how the engagement is going. It really tells you that agriculture investments in Nigeria are not a small, topic. Really, I mean, big hitters, discussing very, very, pertinent issues here. There are a couple of questions. I really want to group them into 3. So number 1, there is a question on how, as a country, Nigeria is engaging the youth. And I will ask, the PAMSEC to probably give a government, perspective, and maybe, either the Chamber of Commerce or our good friend from, Sterling Bank to speak to how either Chamber of Commerce or Sterling Bank are engaging the youth. There are also some questions on financing. I mean, I would like to believe that Nigeria is actually trailing the bless, with NISAL and CBN. There are not many countries that have similar, programs. So there are a few clarifying, questions on how one can access both loans and grants from CBN and NISAL. So I'm not so sure, David, you could advise, because we don't have NISAL on this particular.
I can speak. I think I can respond.
Okay, so let's first of all address the issue of the youth. And now that you have the mic, ma'am, you could speak to how the bank is engaging the youth, and then we can go to the PAMSEC to.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
And just take a minute or two, because we would like him to also give his closing remarks. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we are engaging. Incidentally, we have just launched a product for the youths, women and youth in agriculture, and SMEs called Sway AgFin. So we are working in partnership with MasterCard Foundation to provide finance to women and youth within the agri sector and SMEs. It's a digitized product. It's going to be launched, I think, within the next few weeks, within now and the end of the month, where you can log in, you'll be asked questions on what you do, and you have access to finance, maximum of 20 million for SMEs within the processing value chain. So we are there. If you are a youth, you have a business, just watch out for that product, where it's a single-digit interest rate, and we are going to support the whole. We are looking at over 70,000 youths that we are planning to work with, and women. So Sterling Bank is there to support them. We have other products. You have the broiler value chain. You have a broiler process. We link people to produce the broiler chicken, and we link you to off-takers who are broiler processing plants. So they off-take what you do, and we have been using this for a lot of youths. We'll be working and partnering with state governments to drive their youth in agriculture. So there are so many products that we have. So what we do, we provide the market linkages so that once they have the harvest, there's somebody to offtake, and the process of the offtake will be used to pay down the loan. So we have so many initiatives. And then I wanted to just point out that for NISAL provides guarantee for loans. So if we have SMEs, we have youths who have something that they're doing in the sector and they don't have adequate collateral, we use the NISAL guarantee to the tune of 75%. And that provides that form of collateral. And then we have the off-taker agreement that we have in place. And with that, the transaction is ready for you. So NISAL is not about giving money, but they help the value chain by providing guarantees. While on the part of CBN provides funds to financial institutions to give to the value chain. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Bukola. That's really, really very helpful. Dr. Muazu, any perspective on how the government, the federal government is engaging the youth?
Thank you so much. And this is a very important and pertinent question, especially considering the percentage of the population that are under 30 at the moment. The challenge we have is that agriculture doesn't seem to be attractive to me, largely because of the subsistence nature. So am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, the government believes the only way to engage the youth in agriculture is to try and make agriculture attractive to the youth. And we can only do that if we're able to achieve three things. One, to make land available to the youth in a way that is attractive. Two, to increase the efficiency of the agricultural system itself, especially like my sister from Stalin, Bukola mentioned, and many other speakers, promoting and investing in mechanization. And thirdly, to make financial inclusiveness less difficult and to remove bottlenecks in promoting access to market. So the government is focusing and working with Central Bank and other stakeholders to open up land. Because as you know, the land holding in the country is a complicated issue. And unless you can guarantee land to an aspiring youth who want to get involved in agriculture, if you have to rely on the inherited land, which is shared between families, and which is small in hectareage, that may not be very attractive. And since we have large percentage of land that is arable and cultivable, that is not put to use, the strategy of government is to open up lands and create and provide the infrastructure required around the land for it to be attracted. And that was why the president signed the law re-establishing the Nigerian Agricultural Land Development Authority, NALDA, which will be charged specifically with the responsibility of opening up lands and attracting youth to the land. And we are working with some national governments, especially states, to ensure that we do that. The government is also focusing on providing the needed infrastructure required. Because why do youth normally leave the rural areas to the urban centers? is because they are looking for opportunities. So if you are able to provide the infrastructure they require, that will create opportunities for them to be productive, to earn a living, they'll probably be happy staying back in the villages, in the rural areas, to till the land. And then to work with financial institutions to really walk the talk about financial inclusiveness.
Correct, yeah.
Because I have discussed with many of the commercial banks, but particularly with Bank of Agriculture and Bank of Industry, that the system is not as easy as it is said. We have experimented in many ways to support the banks to make finance available to farmers and to the youth in the cassava substitutions endeavor, the cotton issue, the rice issue. It has not been very easy because of the nature of the financial system itself. Banks are averse to take a risk. Banks want to take collateral. Banks want to be secure because for them it's a business. Yeah. So we are working with, and our belief is that we have to revitalize and recapitalize the Bank of Agriculture. We have to strengthen the National Agricultural Insurance Corporation that will actually take charge and lead in the agricultural insurance issue. And then this key concept of contract farming, which I'm happy to hear from David, that will actually link farmers to something that is definite. That if you are supported to produce, you are not only assured of offtake, but you are assured of offtake at competitive market price. So we believe for us to provide and create jobs, to lift people out of poverty, we have to focus on those who form the bulk of the population. And these are the youth. So this is important, not only for agriculture, but for our national security. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much.
Valentine, sorry.
Yes.
Just to respond.
Bukola, I would like to cut you because we are almost done, but just 1 minute, please.
Okay, 1 minute. Just to respond to the Honorable PAMSEC. There's a product called the Accelerated Agricultural Development Scheme, AADS. It's in conjunction with the Central Bank and the state governments. What the scheme is about is that the state governments are to provide land in each state, and with this land, they bring youth, whether it's poultry they want to do, whether it's aquaculture, whatever they want to do. We will provide finance, and they provide the infrastructure for these youths. So it's a product that targeted solely at youths in partnership with the state governments to ensure that there is, and with access to finance for such projects. So each state is to come up with an initiative or what product he wants to drive, and they will be supported along those lines. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, as our good friends at NESG, Mr. Lawe, as you're listening to this, I think as we gear towards the summit in October, it would be nice to bring to the surface these key partnerships, because if there's a partnership between the federal government and the state, government and a financial institution like, Sterling Bank, these kind of, partnerships would be very good to be showcased at the summit. One last one from Jennifer. There was a question on, what happens after AGRF, how do we track deals? So just 1 minute on the initiatives that we are having to make this a year-long engagement. And then we'll go back to David to, close the session.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Valentine. So in terms of what happens after the event, I think there are two things that are critical. One is we monitor the conversations that have taken place in the deal room so that we have a better understanding of where some of the bottlenecks are to move some of these conversations forward. If we track that over a period of 3, 4, 5 years, it will give tremendous insight into how actually you can, even with some light touch monitoring and facilitation, hopefully push some transaction forward. Number 2 is really hardcore transaction advisory and support to actually close mostly private sector deals, but also in the future, hopefully, public sector deals. So we're working with our partners to identify who can do that. We provided some transaction advisory support last year that will lead to the closure of at least 2 transactions. We're trying to bring more partners on board so that we can not only have good connections and matchmaking, but also within 12 months can actually see cash coming into the sector because of deals closed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, both to Mr. Laue and the team at NESG, and to my good brother, David. It's always a pleasure to engage with our friends, from Nigeria. You know where my love for Nigeria. So thank you so much. Over to you, David, to close the session.
Yep. Thank you very much, Valentine, and thank you to the rest of the team. Before we round up this session, I just wanted to make some additions to the question that you asked to Jennifer. Our friend Augustine Wambo from the AU Development Agency was supposed to be on this call to also talk about what needs to happen with regards to what we call the Country Agribusiness Partnership Framework, CAP-F. CAP-F is a tool that is expected to support government program, bring the private sector together, identify the value chains, discuss the issues, look at the constraints, look at the challenges, look at the opportunities, and be able to work with government to say, we are going to be investing in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 value chains based on the agriculture promotion policy of government, and also the NAIP document that has identified specific value chains, pillars, and things that needs to be done with milestones and targets to be delivered within a 3-year period. And I think that this webinar provides an opportunity for us to be able to work together with the Ministry of Agriculture, work with other stakeholders to be able to ensure that this platform can support and facilitate consistent dialogue like this that brings together the several stakeholders from government, the different ministries of government, recognizing that there is a backward and forward integration that needs to happen. And some of these things are outside the Ministry of Agriculture. So we expect that if we put such mechanism in place, where you have a CAP-F, a functional CAP-F secretariat or so, working with the government, bringing everybody together, you will be able to keep track of the term sheets that are going to be signed from the deal room at AGRF. And then the secretariat is able to work with government and all the other private sector to ensure that these deals are translated from term sheet into actual deals that people are now investing in and all of that. So for me, one of the key takeaway from this meeting is the call to the Nigeria Economic Summit Group to be able to work with the Ministry of Agriculture closely, more closely, and with the other stakeholders to be able to put together this framework as we work on, as government is working on its new blueprints on NAIP and also the APP, so that going forward is not just talk, but it's also about action. And I expect that, like Valentine has said, building to the summit in October, after the AGRF, we would have had opportunity to be able to see some of these deals. By the summit in the Nigeria Economic Summit in October, we can formally come together and say there is a cooperation framework between government, the private sector, to drive the country agribusiness partnership framework moving forward. So that will be my contribution to the question that you asked from Jennifer. How will you track? This is one opportunity to be able to track the term sheets, the deals from the deal room, and take it forward into actual investments that are happening in the country. So thank you to the panelists. Thank you to the Nigeria Economic Summit Group.
Sorry, so you want me to give a response? 1 minute. It's something that we at the NESG can do. We always partner with government. And I want to tell the PAMSEC that we are willing and ready to partner. During this COVID, we actually developed a tracker for the Presidential Task Force on COVID. And it's tracking everything. This tracker with it, not only with the federal, with even the governors across all the 36 states, including federal. So there's a lot of work that we do already. And if you want that, we always look. For us, our partnership is with the government of Nigeria. And our interest is to ensure the environment for doing business is okay for Nigeria. So we are ready and willing to with the Minister of Agri and Rural Development. So, Honorable Minister and PAMSEC, to be sure that we are ready and ready ever.
Thank you very much, CEO, for that. Just before the PS comes in with his closing remarks, I would like to inform our listeners that the 26th Nigeria Economic Summit will take place on the 26th and 27th of October, 2020. And please do make efforts to register. The AGRF is happening from the 8th to the 11th of September. We will be where the deals are happening, matchmaking and all of that. So please do make efforts to go to the AGRF website, register for those sessions, join the deal room sessions, and ensure that you take advantage of the opportunity that has been provided by both the NESG and AGRA to grow agribusiness in Nigeria. So thank you very much. The Permanent Secretary, sir, we will take your closing remarks and formally close this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much. In closing, I would wish to sincerely thank the organizers of this webinar, particularly the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, AGRA, the financial institutions, particularly Bukola, who I have listened to very attentively and got a lot of insight into the effort of the financial sector in promoting agriculture, which is really commendable. And to thank every other person on the panel and those who are joined to this for this very insightful, enriching, and interesting conversations. I think the key issues discussed, I don't need to summarize, but as we have all agreed, agriculture is important not only to Nigeria, but to Africa. And the fundamental aim and objective should be to achieve food security. And then to use agriculture as a driver of our economies, of stimulating industrialization. And we can do that by focusing on the fundamentals, which is focusing on increasing productivity by supporting what they discuss as downstream, midstream, and upstream part of the value chain. And realistically, while looking at the larger agricultural enterprises, but also not forgetting the very important fact that bulk of the contribution of the sector and the sustenance the sector offers are done by the smallholder farmers. So who should be our focus? So we should support them in the pre-harvest, harvest, and particularly post-harvest management. I'm sure everyone knows, especially in Nigeria, that practically 60% of harvest, especially of perishable goods, are lost. So you can't think of promoting business if you don't have the farmers to be able to preserve what they are able to produce to the market and to process and to the table and to industry. We also need to think of things beyond crop. My sister Bokola has spoken about livestock, has spoken about poultry. These are huge subsectors of agriculture that have huge potential to contribute not only to the economy, but to achieving food security. We have to focus on linking production to processing in a way that will stimulate agricultural production. In our humble view, we need to review the Anchor Brewers program together as key stakeholders. It has gone on for 3 or 4 years. It has achieved quite some successes, but I'm sure there are also challenges. And it's good to be honest and say, okay, when you implement a program for a while, it's good to take a look and say, okay, let me evaluate our review to see what we are getting very right and what the challenges are. And we should do that in partnership and collaboration. I also think we have to realistically and honestly promote financial inclusiveness so that we're able to carry everyone and everybody along in ensuring that those who need financial support to produce food are able to get it in a way that is going to impact positively on the sector. Government will have to continue to struggle and do its best to invest to create the environment necessary by investing in infrastructure and focusing on the very important point raised with respect to investing in irrigation. I'm not talking of other countries, but for Nigeria, with a population of 200 million, it would be difficult to feed the nation and use agriculture as a driver of economy if we only rely on rain-fed agriculture. So investing in irrigation is key. And the country has very robust institutional framework to be able to do that. I think what is required is collaboration and synergy. And we are already talking to the Federal Ministry of Water Resources to set up an interministerial committee on national irrigation intervention. We also wish to emphasize that we have to look at the way we trade in commodities. It's important to focus on the commodity exchanges, and we are talking with everyone involved to promote that. But also to remember that a large component and percentage of trading in agriculture is done informally. If you go to the Dawamo market in Kano, or the Kura market near Kano, or the Giwa market on your way to Funtua, you will appreciate what I'm talking about. So we lose large opportunity, both the financial institutions, in allowing large component of trading to go on that is non-formalized, non-regulated. In the process, taking our foodstuff out unprocessed and denying the country of foreign exchange and the ability to return capital and promote production. We also have to focus on export, and focusing on export will first depend on focusing on competitiveness. And you cannot compete without focusing on quality. So we have to work together to ensure that we minimize the bottlenecks for doing business and that we are able to produce what can be exported and that can compete in the international markets, and then that can do well. We believe with our experience in paddy rice that the country can also begin to think of regional trade. There are a couple of our neighbors that produce rice beyond what they think they need. And the demand is high in Nigeria. So can we do that? We process the rice and sell to them, and we import the paddy. I think this is important. But much more importantly, to think of collaboration and partnerships so that everyone who is involved as a key stakeholder will work with one another to achieve this very important objective of promoting agricultural production and promoting agribusiness and manufacturing in the agri-industries. I thank you very much, and I look forward to further interactions, and I assure you of the support, unflinching support of the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development in working with all these very important partners in promoting agriculture and achieving food security. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muazu Abdulkadir. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to NESG this webinar has formally come to a close. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. Goodbye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Thank you for the
Jennifer,
opportunity.
Jennifer, before you go off,
Thank
Jennifer,
you.
Mr. Laoye is looking for you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank
Oh.
you, Dr. Tinuke. Okbel.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Jennifer,
Thank you,
Mr. Laoye is
Jennifer.
looking for you. He said he has not seen you in Nigeria.
He hasn't seen me in Nigeria.
Yes.
Don't worry. After when we can travel, come.
Come rain, come sunshine, I'm supporting Nigeria.